Welcome to the Forest School Podcast, a show where I, Lewis, and my co-host, Wem Southerner, set out to explore a shared pedagogy. It's a space where cerebral thinking matters more than craptivities, where educational purpose outweighs pretty resources, and where inclusion is more than just a buzzword. Join us as we overthink the trivial, deep dive into whatever sparks our dopamine, and reflect on what it means to truly hold space for others, holistically and without judgment. Thanks for being here. We hope you enjoyed this episode. But podcast.
Yes.
That's how they all start now.
Okay. That's the new little thingy.
Do you know what? Can I tell you this is a real boring thing? But when you're like, I'm about to say something to my children that's fully unreasonable, but you only hear it as it starts to come out. Like, could you just? My kids came into this new room the other day, and I was doing a little bit of typing, and they were just sort of flittering around, like when they're like, I want to be in the same space, but I don't need to talk to you. And they found the bowl of fidget toys, and they were just sat in different places of the room. One of them was on their back and fiddling with stuff in the air. Another one had started sticking some of these are magnetic, and they started sticking magnets to like bits of the table. And just they were sort of clicking, and they were kind of singing as they were doing it, going do, 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 do. And I caught myself about to go turn around. I go, could you stop fiddling with the fidget toys? Okay, right. I understand. Okay, I hear it now. But it does mean that there are fidget toys dispersed around this room. Eagle-eyed people can try and play spot the fidget toy in this new background.
Have you got what you need though, Lewis? Have you got one in your hand?
Yeah, I've got these
easy access.
The stim mags.
Well done.
I've got the stim mags, and we also have, which is not mine. I don't love this one. We have this jelly blobfish.
Ooh. Wow. That looks like it's going to get lots of like cat hair and fluff stuck to it quite soon.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
That's the worst.
It's a texture that I don't love.
Yeah.
If you see any of the fidget toys in the background, please let me know.
We're talking about your Ludobotany idea today, aren't we?
Ludobotany, just for the tree. I've tried to write a song. I just showed when it didn't come off, but that was the style of the song. Was real suave, real schmoozy, smarmy. Yes, Ludobotany, specifically this time tree climbing and looking at like what makes a good climbing tree, and could you grow a good climbing tree? And we've got loads of people have sent us little voice notes about their favorite trees to climb and things that they think are important. But it's the first one for a while that we've done. For me, you're doing like academic research all the time, which we said we also might talk about in this episode. Your highly academic professorial life now. But for me, this is the first podcast we've done for a while where it's not just been like, I read one book and now we're reviewing that book. This is quite an interesting process for me to go and do some kind of like digging around in different journals and kind of piecing ideas together. How's it been for you doing that kind of, is that normal research for you now?
Kind of, yes, but my the tangents, the rabbit holes, like embracing all of that is both a complete joy and really hard to manage, I find. So I have to admit, I haven't done research for this episode about trees. I've thought about it and I've got like anecdotal and ideas to discuss, but I haven't done, maybe because I'm doing it elsewhere a lot. But yeah,
it's a break for me. It's a break from other things I'm doing to be like, I'm going to do some academic research, but you are just doing academic. Maybe we could have gone the other way. Okay, here's the pitch for future episodes of Ludobotany. Yeah. I will try and do some academic research, and whatever the Ludobotany topic is, you go and do some like lived experience.
Yeah.
And then we're like switching our lives back over again.
Yes.
How do you feel about that? And then we can report back.
That would be lush.
Okay, grand. So I looked at loads of stuff about tree climbing. There's something about tree climbing where a lot of people have a very strong connection to whatever tree they climbed in their youth. Mm-hmm. I found it's quite hard to find. So I was trying to look for anecdotes of like, is there anybody who like free solos and who, because there's all these like Tarzan style people who sort of barefoot up trees, and they do kind of very calisthenic-y style things. And I wondered if I could find any of those people who had ever done any interviews to be like, oh, yeah, I always try and get into like mangrove forests, or the best place to do it is out in here. And by and large, the anecdotes that you can find about tree climbing are all people saying about trees that they climbed as children. So I think there's something in there about like, and this is kind of undercutting the whole premise of Ludobotany, but like there is a nugget of like, whatever you have is the right tree.
Yeah.
So I think getting that out to begin with is the thing. Obviously there are pros and cons of different trees, which I then was very interested in. One of the things I wanted to look up was like branch strength, because you've probably come across them as well, right? Where we have these things where people will go, as long as you're within 6 inches of the trunk, then the branch is strong enough, or as long as it's bigger than your wrist, then it will hold your body weight. And I've always found things like that to be they're interesting, kind of like, is the word rubric when you have a
or guideline.
Anyway, when you sort of make up like heuristic, that's the word I mean. Okay. Heuristic is when you have like a rule of thumb, a heuristic. And the wrist one has always got me, because I've always been like, yeah, but a wrist size amount of holly is very different to a wrist size amount of bamboo, and I would trust one of them way more than the other. So where is this
excuse me,
where is this heuristic coming from? Is there any science that I can find
I think forest school's full of those, and that's a really good point to make. And they get bandied around as if they're like gospel truth. And like, when you stop to go, hang on a minute, who came up? Do you know what I mean? Like, you meet a forest school practitioner, they're like, oh yeah, but we always say like, never pick up a stick that's longer than blah blah blah, or never do the thing with the thing, or always make sure this and this. And you're like, why though? Like,
do you know what I realized?
And it comes from like, oh, my trainer told me, and his or her trainer told them, and it's like, yeah, but who makes it up?
Well, and also they move in the same way that I was talking to someone the other day, and I think they're like the forest school equivalent of like, don't swing on your chairs. I knew someone who swung on their chairs once, and they're dead. Their head exploded on the wall. And I was talking to someone about this the other day, and I was like, it's the only time it's not true. Because if a teacher had seen a child die in front of them, you wouldn't be bandying it about like, hey, tell me about this trauma thing that happened to me.
I know. My daughter literally said this week, my teacher says never run with scissors, because once they taught a kid who ran with scissors open, and they tripped and the scissors went up their nose, and now they're paralyzed. I was like, what? I've heard that about like, don't stick a pencil up your nose, like that urban myth about somebody was really depressed in an exam, put a pencil up their nose, and I've heard that. But I
like the idea of scissors though. Just it's something about it sort of. It's almost like an intrusive thought, isn't it? That it maps to your nostrils, and someone's kind of gone, yeah, probably. That's amazing.
I know. They were like, yeah, she definitely did. She said she definitely did. I was like, I'm not sure that's true. Sorry. Anyway, back to trees.
Back to trees and strength. So one thing that I found was that there's some studies I found about branch spacing and effective collar development. Right. So collar development being the point at which the branch comes out of the tree, and the collar is kind of that area around the tree, which if we kind of take a moment to observe it, it is often like thickened and like more built up. And so I found some stuff that said that as long as that has adequate space to develop, that collar is actually more important than the thickness of the branch in terms of load strength for that branch. So you could have, and this is what I thought was quite interesting, you could have lots of branches going in one direction, but if they are stacked vertically on top of each other, those collars, the bottom of one collar is touching the top of the other, and it won't have had adequate space potentially to grow. Whereas if you could theoretically find trees where the branches were kind of spiraled around a trunk, then each collar would have had adequate spacing to like develop fully around the branch. And in terms of load bearing capacity, that is what's actually kind of more important than some of this. I found quite interesting, because I'm now I felt like I was giving myself the tools to look at trees and like assess them for tree climbing without necessarily doing it, but being able to go like, oh right, well that's now a thing I can look at, isn't it? Do the trees go round and round and round and round and round? So I think that's an interesting thought. Are you ready to hear from one of the listeners?
Yes.
Grand. Let's go. Here we go.
Oh, hello. I'm Lily from Kindling, and what tree do I think is the best tree to climb? Now, I always climbed a particular silver birch tree as a child. That was a really good tree. Very thin branches though, especially when you get high up. The last tree I climbed was a sycamore tree, but it was on its side, which is a novelty. And then the one before that I climbed was a beech tree. So I think the best tree to climb is actually the one that is nearest you, that is good for climbing. So get up a tree. Go on. Away.
That's similar to
There
what
we
you
go.
said. Have you ever read some poetry by Robert Frost? If you haven't, I recommend a poem, and I think it is called Swinger of Birches, which is all about climbing birch trees until they get to the really skinny top and then like flipping off them. It's such a lush poem. That's what that reminded me of.
No, I haven't heard that.
Birches. It's just called Birches. It's lush. What you were saying about collar strength reminded me of that book by Tristan Gooley called How to Read a Tree. Have you ever read it? It's so deep and detailed, and I tried to listen to it as an audiobook whilst I was in the woods walking, so I could then look at trees and see what he was talking about. And I kind of loved it and also found it overwhelming because it was so like absolutely focused in on very minute details of tree growth. But it's really good. It's really good if any listener wants to delve into collars and branches and stuff.
Oh, yeah. Well, okay, so that links because there's a lot of stuff in Tristan's books where he talks about the tick effect, where he talks about like shorter branches on one side, longer on the other, and you can use this to kind of tell which way south is most likely to be. Not 100%. It's a heuristic. That's the word. I'm going to get it in now. You get a drink every time I say heuristic. One I did find was some articles are saying that most tree species, if they are planted on slopes, will have more branches facing downhill.
Okay.
Which I found very interesting because it was counterintuitive to what I would have thought, which would have been that they might have. So, when you sometimes cut a tree and you look at the stump and you're like, oh, the pith of this tree, the real center of the circles of the rings is off center. And you can see like, oh, yeah, the wind's been hitting it from this direction. So the tree is like bulked up on this side. And I would have thought that trees would have grown more branches kind of uphill to weight themselves that way against the hill, but that doesn't seem to be the way. That seems to be that from this study that I found, that most trees will make more branches on the downhill side slope, which is interesting in terms of lots of us have hills on our sites, and if I think about the trees that are climbable in our woods, those are all in flat areas, and that might be to do with species, but it also is slightly, I think, to do with, is this something that I've just not been aware of, that like the reason that there's climbable trees in those locations is that those are flat bits. And on the hills, the trees have got branches that we can't get to. What do you think?
Yeah, so you'd be able to see the branches, but you wouldn't necessarily be able to reach them. Is that the idea? And also, if you looked at the roots of a tree on a hill, does that mean that you'd have like the branches on the downhill side, but if you looked at the roots, would the roots be more strong and developed on the side that's uphill? I'm really intrigued by that, to like balance out. Yeah,
That's definitely a hole in my research here because I mainly focused on the bit of the tree that's out of the ground because that was my focus, was like tree climbing. How do I think about that bit? I
Did
didn't
you
really.
find anything about levels of light and how that relates to the amount of branches at certain heights? Because I just wonder whether there's something about like a tree that's more overshadowed producing more branches as it grows, more smaller branches, resulting in the beech trees on our site, which have lots of thin, low branches.
Well, so those are something called as far as I can remember, those are something called defender branches, which are slightly different to. So lots of people, when we were looking at this, lots of people have sent us messages and talking about low branches, which is something that I want to talk about later. But defender branches are a phenomenon where from about like 5 foot, trees sort of grow branches and they're like skirt shaped. They're going to go out and down like a petticoat kind of shape, and those are to stop anything growing around them. So they're not actually for like photosynthesis very much. They are for like protecting the root space for themselves, which in unmanaged woods, that can be one of the things, is that like these big trees will have big defender branches down like a skirt and will stop any kind of like natural regeneration. Not any, will really be stopping that kind of natural regeneration, whereas they might. And then if you see them where in places where there's grazing, those defender branches get cut up to whatever the height of the grazing things is, which then stops them from. Anyway, that's a thing. What I can tell you is that horizontal branches from a trunk are not any weaker in terms of load bearing strength than branches that are angled up, which is counter to what my brain and physics would tell me, which is that like, well, the lever is already pulled halfway down on a horizontal branch and therefore it's taking more weight. But apparently, as found according to this, that I will put all the links to these studies in the show notes. The horizontal branches have the same load bearing strength as the up angle. Now, I guess what pinch of salt with that, or something to factor into that, is combining that with the collar development. So a horizontal branch with an equally developed collar is probably the same. But I always think, that thing where you're tree climbing, and like my preference would be for more horizontal branches when I'm tree climbing. One of the things I find very difficult tree climbing is when I have to sort of turn my foot and wedge the side of my foot in. So the sole of my foot, for people listening, the sole of my foot is then against the trunk. And it feels very like ape-like to turn my thing like that. But as I get older, my knees are enjoying that less and less. So I think for me, there's something
your ankle joints. And also like small people, I've actually found a graphic here that you may have come across this as well. There are names for those type of branches. You've got the horizontal one is a plagiotrophic shoot, horizontal growth habit, and the more vertical or diagonal one is called an orthotropic shoot with a vertical growth habit. And that's from bugwoodcloud.org. But with a more vertical or orthotropic shoot, then small people can put their foot in there, like when bigger people can't necessarily, but then they get their shoe or welly stuck. Like the amount of times that happens, like it's a really it's like a snug rung on a ladder. Help me, it's completely wedged, and having to help somebody in that situation is quite common, I've found.
Yeah, and also I have observed that those tell me the word for the angled ones again.
Orthotropic,
thank you. Those orthotropic branches, I think, take more wear and tear from tree climbing than horizontal ones do. There is something about the angle and the scraping that often destroys lots more bark in that crook. So if we're thinking about like what is the best tree for climbing, I think part of the conversation needs to be like the longevity of that tree as a climbing tree. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Let's hear from somebody else.
My name's Michael. My favourite tree that I ever climbed was a big oak tree, which I climbed probably about 40 years ago. And I lay on a great big bough, which was about 10 feet off the ground, and a whole herd of fallow deer ran directly underneath me, and it was total magic.
That is lush. That is lush. I can I talk about my favourite trees to climb?
Yeah.
Am I allowed? Because for me, there is something like Michael described about being horizontal. So I don't personally necessarily enjoy the feeling of climbing to a height in a tree and being like, check me out. Like I do.
Yeah,
Like
I hadn't considered this. There are many types of tree climbing, aren't
yeah.
there?
So
Yeah.
like there's something very exhilarating about going high and getting a view and feeling that like swimmy feeling in your tummy and
Mm,
feeling the movement of the tree and stuff. But there's something different about climbing to any height, even quite a low height, where a bough is very horizontal and supports you so that you can become horizontal. And
yes.
so I had or even like reclined.
The
So I
tree
had
can hold you.
the
As
tree can
opposed to
hold
you
you.
climbing up the tree
Yeah.
holds you in
You
a
can get to
post-humanist kind of way.
yeah, you can get like yeah, you can get to a really like a position of comfort that you could actually stay there for some time. So I had a tree in my
Mhm.
garden, which was a box elder tree, which did get cut down because, and I was very sad about it because it had gone past the end of its supposed natural life. Like it was fine,
Oh, okay.
but
But someone
somebody,
said this isn't,
yeah, someone said, "Oh, this tree isn't meant to live this old, so let's cut it down." And I was like, "But it's got this one branch where the branch comes out of the trunk with a bit of a like a horizontally curve before it goes vertical." That's quite hard to describe.
No,
So
yeah.
like a chair, like an
Yeah.
armchair with a like reclined back, so you can climb up to that branch and then you can just like flop kind of thing. Um, so that was a good tree, and also I think they're laurel trees, but I can't remember. And I tried to look this up. At Stour Head National Trust property and at other National Trust property or like stately home gardens, you often get these like big specimen trees that have been
Hmm.
planted in sort of landscaped areas where they've become really old. And in fact, that Laurel definitely does do this because we have taken our kids, you and I, forest school kids, to the woods over the road where there is that big laurel with
Hmm.
all of those very low, very horizontal branches, the kind of ones
Yes,
that
yes,
you
yes,
can
yes,
kind
yes.
of be on and then you can kind of ride it like a horse and bounce on it a bit um,
Hmm.
or this is my bed, that's your bed, this is our like home and these are all our bedrooms. Those kind of, I think that structure of tree where you're not going very high, you are finding your place horizontally
Always makes me
just
think
off
about
the
the Lost
ground.
Boys in Peter Pan in
Oh
Hook.
yeah.
They're all up in like that
Yeah.
kind of tree house where they're all sort of more like nests than tree
Yeah,
houses, just those kind
totally.
of things.
I think
Um,
that really facilitates a type of play that I find really, really special. Like, so it's like a house. And similarly, I, like Lily said on her comment, trees that are dead, fallen trees. Oh my God,
mm,
epic playgrounds. Like, does that count?
oh,
Because
absolutely.
they can
I want to stick for a minute
become,
though, if we can,
go
because
on,
we've got some.
what?
Well, we've got some. We've got another person that sent in some things more about species, which I think if we're talking about laurel and things like that,
Okay.
it kind of feeds into this conversation.
I'm Elijah, and my favourite tree to climb is a hornbeam.
So there we go. Elijah's favourite tree, hornbeam, which I would. So I was looking up. One of the nice things about doing this, not in the woods, is that I can Google these trees,
Mm-hmm.
and I was trying to work out. Yeah, if you look at these kind of trees, is there anything? So there's something to do with trees that are like coppiceable or like sometimes might be kind of more traditional, like hedging ones, like the laurel, where they then split at the bottom. And that there's something in there about facilitating tree climbing in coppicing woodlands because those stools, you can almost create those nests. I was thinking about this in terms of like if you were cultivating a tree climbing tree, maybe specifically for that type of play that you're imagining there of like nests, what would you do? And I think if I in a dream world, I would have like a coppiced stool and then at about 2 or 3 foot, I would almost do a very short pollard at 2 or 3 foot. So it then sprouted at 2 or 3 foot, and I would choose possible ones over there, and then I would do that, and sort of every 2 to 3 foot, I would be pollarding it over the years, so that what you would end up with is this kind of uh, almost like a tree of life type thing, with a few at the bottom, and then more branches, and then more branches. So it kind of extrapolates out. Have I described that well enough?
Yeah,
Do you know what I
makes
mean?
sense.
So you've got these kind of coppicey things, and I think there's something to be said there about coppice trees. But the other thing that I looked at was, have you got something you could look up pictures with?
Yeah.
Please, could you just stick into like Google Images, live oak, and have a look at some of the pictures that come up, because lots of things that I found described live oaks as prime tree climbing candidates. And maybe if you can describe the pictures that you're seeing.
So a live oak is a specific species of tree. Oh no, any number of.
Yeah.
This is just saying that it's any type of oak. Is that right?
Oh, on
sand
images.
live- Texas live oak. Yeah, nice. Lots of low branches. Yeah, lots of low branches. Nice shapes. Very beautiful.
Yeah. So lots of these do this thing that I've observed but never really put a name to, and I still don't think I have a name to it, which is where. So we were just talking about those defender branches that come out like a dress. But southern live oaks and live oaks seem to do this thing where their defender branches go down, hit the ground, and they kind of run along the ground for a bit,
Yes,
and then
that's
come back
exactly
up.
what I'm talking about. That's exactly what I'm talking about. With
But
these
these
like,
branches are huge. These branches are like
yeah,
a foot, 2 foot across. But
yeah,
there's something about that kind of like it's gone from the tree, doosh, hit the ground, and kind of just trailed along. And
yeah,
because then I was thinking about the ways that you can get into tree climbing. There's it seems to me that there's two ways. You can either be the type of tree climbing where you go to the trunk of the tree and you start going up vertically. That's the thing. Whereas these live oaks and trees like that have these big swoopy branches, they're often ways that young people will start to enter trees from quite far away, and you're almost then approaching the tree and you're already 2 foot up when you get to the trunk, or you're already there's something very different in terms of your
yeah.
relationship to the tree, in terms of like approaching it like, ooh, and like, this is my ramp, this is my access to the tree.
We've got some beech trees near our house on a hill that have branches like that, where they've
Okay.
got branches, uphill branches actually, and because of the way the branch is growing and it's hitting the slope of the hill, it does that. So it hits the ground and then goes
Okay.
up, which means that small people can get really high in a tree really quickly, including my daughter when she was about 2.5, and she was just like, she was walking up and down the bit that had hit the ground, and I
Yeah.
looked away for a second and she was at the trunk, which actually meant her falling distance was
Oh.
extremely high. It's had that absolute like heart and mouth moment of like, if I call out or show alarm,
Yeah.
she's
Yeah.
going
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
swoop and fall off. So it's like, okay, now let's walk back down. Yeah, I'd forgotten about that. Yes,
How?
that kind of does enable like a lot of height very quickly if you are a small person.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
we've talked before about like sometimes we must have talked on the podcast years ago about that thing that like majority of our practice in the woods has been like, if you can get yourself into that place, you can get yourself out. So we didn't like lift people up into like super high branches and all of that kind of thing. That is something that you only get if you're doing that type of tree climbing where you're going from the trunk and you're climbing up the branches, and that you might even like, there's a tree in our woods which the branch was getting some wear and tear, which meant that the best thing I could do was like surgically remove this branch. But the upshot of me removing this branch, which was like it was like a foot high, is that I have changed that tree as a tree climbing tree, in that now only like slightly bigger children can climb that tree. I've changed the access to that tree. The branch was going to die anyway. I was just trying to do it sort of cleanly. So these big swoopy branches that come down to the ground, they don't have that kind of barrier to access, which is like great in terms of like, oh yeah, you don't need to lift anybody up, you can do the thing. But sometimes there are benefits, I think, to that barrier, which is like, you don't get yourself into something you can't get out of.
I think there's also a different body movement that gets you there, isn't there? So the ones where you think of traditional tree climbing, of climbing it almost like a ladder near the trunk, you're climbing and you're using upper body strength and lower body strength together. But if you are doing that horizontal thing, you might get there by walking or by crawling, or by bum shuffling.
Bum
Yeah.
shuffling. Put your hands, sit either side of the trunk, of the branch, and put your hands in front of you. Push your bum up and just shift forwards like that.
Yeah.
And then do another little bum shuffle.
Yeah. And that will be the way that you'll have to get down, but backwards or turn around. And that's quite scary. So you probably can get yourself out of it. It's just that you have, it's sort of fooled your brain a bit in that you think it's going to be an easy thing because you're just crawling up a horizontal thing, and then you look at the ground and how it's differed from where you started, and you're like, oh no, I actually don't want to be that high. But that's impossible to predict before you're already there. So I think that's a really good risk thing, isn't it? That's a very good. Oh God,
Right.
yeah.
Would you like to hear from John Cree, who's decided to send John? This is one of the only ones that I've listened to beforehand. John has sent this to us in a very busy household, so I may have to do some post processing to try and clean this up a little bit. But here is what John sent us.
Hello. So this is me. I've just asked my grandson what the best tree to climb is for him, and it is one that's got branches low down. So for me, though, the best tree to climb is the one that I was climbing on Sunday. One of the oldest oak trees I've ever seen on a site that I visit regularly. It's probably but all the lower branches were on the floor, so it's dead easy to get up into the trunk and climb right up the trunk. I could send a picture if you want. So at the moment, that's the best tree to climb. Probably when I was younger, it would have been something else. I think I started my tree climbing career off in rhododendrons, but there you go. Probably too much information. And this is John, who's now 67, still tree climbing.
Oh, yeah, rhododendrons share that quality of that low branch thing and a canopy. That same thing of like, it's like our house. This is our house. These are our rooms. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's interesting, John, acknowledging the difference in kind of like trees that you might have liked to climb as a child and trees that you might like to climb as you're, an adult, or as your body like has changed and things like that. And one of the things that I wanted to sort of ask you about was, how much do you think the perception of adults on the ground changes the experience of tree climbing? And what I mean by that is that I think when I was a kid, climbing trees, the height that you might climb to different trees felt very different. If there's an adult there and you kind of lean out and you're like, look, I'm as tall as you. Look, I'm taller than you. And then you maybe go a little bit higher and you're like, Mummy, Daddy, I'm the tallest. I'm taller than even you are. And you're like doing this like height comparison, as opposed to just tree climbing on your own with no, like, whether that's as an adult or as a child, but just tree climbing on your own where you're it's just you and the tree, or maybe you and your peers, but not in a way that you're, do you know what I mean? There's like a height comparison thing when you've got an adult on the ground. How did you feel about that? Did you climb with and without adults?
I was thinking that I don't think I ever climbed with adults. I was a bit more feral. I think it was just do stuff with no adults around. So I can't really comment on that. I guess I was thinking though, as you were talking about like group tree climbing, and I think that's really interesting when you've got like one climbable tree and a class, say, of children or half a class of children, and somebody decides they want to be high, and then suddenly quite a few people decide they want to be really high, and then there's a competitive element, and there's like feet and fingers and branches that maybe aren't very strong and all those things. And I've definitely had to sort out some
Yeah, people almost
mild.
blocking people in at the top of the tree. Someone's gone
Yes,
up, and someone else goes like, "I'm going to get up behind you," and they're like, "Great." But and they're like, I want to be the highest. You're like, well, you can't change places on that tree.
yeah,
You know, and they're like, well, he needs to come down. She needs to
yeah,
come down.
exactly that.
Right. But you can't get round each other. Everyone has to come down. So
Exactly. And I think,
that's another bit of tree climbing, which
yeah,
is the density of other. Oh, okay. Maybe we're going to say different things. I think there's something about the density of other trees being nearby. And I can remember tree climbing as a child where you go up one trunk and you could move across to some other ones
oh,
and come down on some other trunks. Did you
fancy.
ever have that?
No, wish I
Okay.
did.
Okay.
That's very cool. No, I've never seen that before ever.
Oh, really?
No,
Huh.
not
So
in
it sometimes takes a bit of cultivating, I think. Like you could cultivate it in that you could, with a couple of trees, I think you could, not graft, but you could put some branches together with a bit of garden wire and sort of train them so that they got bigger and bigger, and you could make a pathway between. I'm talking about a span of between trees of 2 meters, a meter or 2 meters. I'm not talking
yeah.
about kind of like navigating a forest without touching the ground, but there's
Which would also be cool.
which would also be very cool. Full
I
Ewok.
Can I talk about, and I don't know if you've read anything about this or if you have had any thoughts about how it feels in your body when you're tree climbing, and how that might tap into like ancient parts of our brain.
Mm-hmm.
So, like that example where there's lots of people in a tree, and it was at a forest school session that I was running at school, and this would happen quite often. This kind of sort of disagreements about the tree, and that some disagreements would be about like power and control and autonomy, and like I want to be the highest and they're in my way, or I feel blocked in or whatever. Some of them would be based on perceived needs of the tree. So like one
Yeah.
person going, I can feel that this tree doesn't want this many people in it. It doesn't like it. It doesn't feel like it's made for that many people. And we'd have discussions about that. So they would, and I think I spoke about it last time we podcasted, about coming up with a group decision about like, we've decided that for our group, this tree can only hold 3 people. So that's what we're going to do based on like, oh yeah, but I kind of feel the branch wobbling a bit when la 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 la. And also that thing about, this is, my daughter told me this, so I don't know where she got it from, whether it's true. Maybe you told her and she told me. But that thing of when you are asleep or falling asleep and you get that
Yeah, I was going to say this. Yeah.
and you wake, and she said to me, do you know that is left over from the time we lived in trees, and you feel yourself falling off the branch and you are jolted awake so that you can grab and stay in the tree and not plummet. So I'm kind of interested in this, like how it feels in our bodies. Like, did you read anything about that, or do you have any thoughts about that?
I didn't research that. I must be honest. Yeah, that startle reflex is a thing that they look for, because they look for it in newborns, don't they? They do a very small kind of like jolt down, and you're looking for the newborn humans to kind of go whoop and grab, because we're carrying mammals and we would have grabbed the fur. There's or grab the branch, or later in life and all those things. I didn't, but I'm interested in. I would like to now go and do some research. This is one of the things of this episode, is I feel like we're going to arrive with some research, and then also find lots more things in this episode that we could go, yeah, but I need to kind of go and look that up now, and maybe there'll be follow up that we can bring back in future episodes where we go, yes, we did discuss that. They do the thing. Because one of the things that is making me wonder is, we've talked about before on the podcast, that there's that like universal experience that pictures of like savanna with like mild forest, mild kind of tree populations makes people feel the calmest over and above the environment that they may be used to. So whether you're in a city, because the obvious one is people are like, oh, in a city, if you see a calm environment like that, it's like, oh yeah. But it's also true of like people who live in very like Arctic regions have expressed that they are the most calm when they see that kind of stuff, and people that live in like dense bamboo forests, it's that. And there's something potentially people have said that it may be a hangover from this kind of like human evolution in the savannah, in Africa and Central Africa, and where that's kind of where we're most at home. And so one thing I would be interested in is finding out more about the trees that are there that are climbable, those kind of species, and whether they have any implication on things like, relatively speaking, we will have been as a species, we will have been climbing conifers for a lot less time than we will have been climbing, dense hardwood trees. And is there any difference in sensation in climbing different species of trees in terms of how long those species have existed? I'm waffling here, but do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That we would have had yeah. Okay, ready for another one?
Yep.
Let's go.
Hi, my name's Matt, and my favourite tree to climb with my groups is a lovely old yew tree, which has got branches right from the bottom, which means that even the youngest children that I work with, of about 4 or 5-year-olds, can still access tree climbing, and it goes all the way up with lovely big branches that they can sit in and they can climb around. And it gives us a chance to talk about toxicity and making sure that the children don't put anything in the mouths whilst they're being supervised climbing the tree, but it's a really lovely one to connect with.
Well, I mean, in terms of like connection and human interactions with trees, I don't think in this part of the world we've got a longer history than yew trees. And the symbolism and the religious connection to yew trees is huge, isn't it? But yeah, again, another point for like low down branches, which I'd be interested to know if people knew that was going to be a theme before we started.
I think they would have, just for the obvious like access requirements, but I think this thing about it being sort of horizontal and low is a thing. I've read before that yew trees in churchyards and stuff are, and like the spiritual thing is often because meetings or community events were held by yew trees. And I wonder why that was. I wonder whether it was something about like we can sit, before there was much furniture around, like it's quite a comfortable place to sit. We can sit kind of in a round on low branches. It's like a ready-made meeting place, and whether there's anything in that. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I do know what you mean. Yeah. Does it naturally provide a kind of, like lots of governments are kind of held in the round, aren't they? Or in a horseshoe shape. And does it do anything like that? I think yew tree is an interesting one to engage with, because one of the notes that I did make that I wanted to explore was the very different experiences of tree climbing in the summer in the UK, in the Northern Hemisphere, versus tree climbing in the winter. And whether there would be some trees that I know there are some trees in our woods that they're not only climbable in the summer, but they are significantly easier to climb when things have dried out, when there's a bit of foliage, and the experience of being up in trees is very different when you're like, one of my experiences, my memories from childhood is like being up in this kind of big, it was like an oaky, maybe like a I don't know, the other kind of stuff that might have been in it, but this sort of massive hedge that in my mind was maybe 20 foot tall, probably wasn't actually that tall. But the experience in the summer of poking out from the foliage and being like, I'm here, almost like, like the start of some kind of kids TV show, and then disappearing back into the foliage and then scrambling around and then poking out in a different space and being like, now I'm down here.
fun.
Which is a different experience to in the winter, right? When everything drops, and there's a very different kind of vibe to tree climbing, with that feeling of maybe being more exposed, maybe feeling less like held, with branches feeling a bit more brittle and trees moving a bit more. Do you think you could find do you think there are trees that are like year-round climbers and these are like summer climbers or winter climbers?
I would go back to my example of the laurels or the rhododendrons or those big house-like trees that are perfect any time of year because they are their own little micro environment, which is, sheltered from eyes and bad weather and heat, and it's always the same. It's like a little microclimate in there with a nice dry floor often.
Yes, that's very true.
Oh, lovely.
Do
Lovely, lovely.
you think, okay, so this is a thought that's coming to me in the moment, but often we're talking about that kind of community space and that space holding thing that trees often offer. Do you think that in an ideal world, lots of forest schools have the kind of tarp roof or parachute roof, that's what's over the meeting space. But in making those kind of spaces, we don't then necessarily provide opportunities to tree climb and be part of like community proceedings. So what I'm imagining was if you were sat around in a circle of trees, so let's say they're like evergreen trees that have grown in a little bunch of things, you could be holding a conversation whilst in a very kind of like inclusive and, some people need to move their bodies kind of way. Some people need to be in the thick of it. Some people need to be at the edge. You would not just be doing that horizontally in terms of where are you sat on the benches, but also vertically in terms of like, do you know what, for that child there, the best place for them to join in with the morning circle is actually to go up that tree and to sit and to join in from up there. And for these people, it's but something about us having kind of these, human produced roofs, then you can't be in the tree because then you can't see down through the parachute or through the tarp.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Tree climbing as an extension of that kind of like inclusive space holding, to be like, we got to explore horizontal and north, south, east, west, that kind of vibe, and also the vertical to be like, do we get but with that it comes the challenge of at a small scale, if you have benches round a circle and some of them are umpires chairs and some of them are low down benches and some of the there becomes a prestige thing about like who's like you were saying, who's the highest up in the tree and who's sitting on the low branch. Oh, you're on the bum branch. And like things like that. So like, is tree climbing an inclusive tool for giving people the space and the autonomy that they need, or is it a tool that takes away flattened hierarchies in a space?
Yes.
And in a play space even, how many times might you be with a group of children who are like, we're all going to go and decide the rules for the game, but as they're deciding the rules for the game, somebody kind of shimmies up a tree nearby and kind of holds court from there and is like, listen everybody, I'm going to the height equals might kind of thing.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you did spend many hours leveling the ground for where the meeting circle is in the woods. So there's definitely something that we feel about being higher and how that makes us feel. And some people don't like it, It's not just always people like being high. Yeah.
Yeah. It's an interesting one. Our last one is from Sarah Lawful.
Hello, Lewis and Wem. This is Sarah Lawful here from Where the Fruit Is, coaching and training. I love oak trees. I think they're brilliant for tree climbing, and I guess they smell great. They've got so many exciting things in them. Their branches are really strong, and they often have low branches for children to climb. I think they're the strongest trees and super safe to climb, and the history of them is just super exciting. I'm looking forward to your podcast. Can't wait to listen to it.
Amazing.
Nice.
So good. Do you think that climbing a tree connects you with the history of it?
Ooh,
Take a moment now. We'll take several. Will join us next month when Wem has considered this question.
Sorry if you can hear Oscar purring his head off. It's my cat. Can you hear him?
Yeah.
I think that physical contact with a tree in any way connects one to the history of it if you are that way inclined. I think you don't have to climb it, you can embrace it. have a little moment. I've got two trees that I'm really intimate with. I've got a really special relationship with them. I came
to this podcast with academic research with like rigor and
Yeah.
you're just talking about getting off with trees, and when I said,
don't
why don't you go
mean-
and have the lived experience? That's not what I meant.
I don't mean no, not quite. You know, like
Not quite.
one of them is very saucy, I have to say. But that is an oak tree, and oak tree, he's quite saucy. But there's the Queen Beech. She's
What
not
does
saucy.
that mean?
You just have to. I don't know. I can't define it. But I think if you are in physical contact with the tree in any way, I think personally you can't help but start thinking about how long has this tree been here? What has it seen? What's happened? And with one other oak tree at one point, I think it was in lockdown actually, because it's the kind of thing you do when you've got quite a lot of time on your hands. But we were like trying to work out how old this oak tree was. We're kind of hugging it, and that's when you start thinking about the age, isn't it? When you hug
Sure.
something and you're like, "Jeebus, it's really big." And so I aged it using the calculators that you can get online.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And which are really fun. And then there was a stone on the ground, so I wrote with a piece of charcoal on the stone how old the tree was and what was happening in England at that time. So it happened that the tree was a sapling when the first steam locomotive was created. Those dates tallied up. So I just left that at the bottom of the tree as a little, like, people might be walking past on the footpath, and it won't last forever, but they might be interested in that. Yeah. I think that's what appeals to us about trees a lot is that history, isn't it? Is the age of them, timelessness, our own life insignificance in comparison. In terms of,
I think
length.
there is something about humans have been very good through history of getting rid of megafauna. You know, things that were bigger than us. We have got rid of, or a lot of them were gone before humans kind of started knocking about, but there would have been a lot of them that we've kind of moved. And there's something because I was trying to work out one thing. Maybe this is my last point on this, and I was trying to work out, like, why is tree climbing different to like jungle gym climbing or ladder climbing? Because I hate ladders. Like I really don't like. I do go up ladders a lot, but I don't. And you could look at it and be like, well, a ladder is perfectly horizontal. The steps are like equally spaced. It's been stress tested, so you know what the weight is on it. All of those things that we've talked about like what makes a good tree for tree climbing. Like, why isn't a ladder the best experience of climbing?
Well, it's not fastened into the ground with bloody massive roots that go really, really, really deep into the earth, for one.
Sure. But there is also something for me. There's something about the fact that, like, I'm joking about that post-humanist thing, but that thing of like, I'm climbing up something alive that is bigger than me, that for most of my experience, I'm bigger than the cats that live in my house. I'm bigger than all the birds in the woods. I'm bigger than even some of the, especially in the UK, like a lot of the fauna and badgers and foxes and things like that. Like, I'm bigger than all of them. And so that experience of being small and that, again, we're talking about those like hedgerows trees, those rhododendrons and those laurels and those things like that squirming in between. As much as I'm like, oh, there's a good amount of spacing for branches, like I like trees where you've got good space to move around. There's something about those trees of squirming in between the gaps, and it's not quite right, and you have to kind of like arch your back round this way and get under here, and that's a very like, ooh, and this big alive thing is holding me and I'm squirming around. So there's loads of different thoughts about trees, loads of different things to consider, and loads of like, oh, wish I'd done more research on that. I'm absolutely going to go and do more research on all those things.
Well, also, we have an episode in the pipeline, don't we? We're not sure exactly when yet, but we have been collecting books about trees, and we're going to like bring them together and have like a lovely, delicious tree book mini festival at your house.
My house.
And we're going to make a podcast.
And none of you were
it.
invited, just one.
Well, you are, listeners, like virtually.
Afterwards. Virtually invited. Don't come to my house, please.
No.
No matter how many tree books you bring. Actually, no, I will say, okay, I'm going to talk about this in the episode. I have really enjoyed this experience of like researching a niche thing, tree play type relationship thing.
Yeah.
I have a pitch for the next episode so that we can
Yes.
let people know so they can send things in.
Go on.
So my pitch for the next Ludobotany episode is loose parts. And specifically, I would like to be like, do you think acorns are better than chestnuts? Do you think that like the shells of a beech nut are the absolute like, you know, peak of loose parts play? Is it berries because they squish? Like, what is the best loose parts play that comes from trees? What lasts the
All
longest?
plants,
You know,
right?
pardon?
All plants, trees,
All
all
plants. Yeah.
and
Like what lasts the
maybe
longest? What is the most like sensorily engaging?
yeah.
Like loose parts. What have we
Yes.
got? So you
And
can
also
email admin@theforestschoolpodcast.com. You can go on the website. All the links are in the show notes, and you can send us the voicemails like everyone has been on today's episode. It's really easy. You just hit one button and your phone will immediately start recording. So you can just talk to us and just send us a thing. Yes.
maybe some listeners might have some like really unusual loose parts, like maybe unusual for other people to hear about, like a specific tree or plant that grows in your area, or you or your groups have found a really unique thing to do with a natural loose part that you think maybe other people haven't done. I'd love to hear about that. That would be cool.
If you are dedicated, you can look up Children of the Forest on Google Maps. We have an address. You can post me loose parts and I will gladly receive small packages of loose parts.
Although not from other places in the world, because that would be a custom.
No, of course, obviously, like go obey the law. What's the bar with our listeners that we have to be like, oh yeah, but by the way, do laws.
Well,
do the laws, everyone, please.
I was in Holland the other day and I wanted to bring back living plants, and I realised that I couldn't, and I was greatly disappointed.
From Holland? I didn't think Holland was kind of far enough away ecosystem-wise that we wouldn't have already intermixed everything.
Well, I'm sure that is true, but the Eurostar really, really didn't want me to bring back plants.
Also, incredible. This is an incredible like cover story if you were trying to bring back, and I'm going to use air quotes, plants from Holland, and you were like, hey, I'd like to bring back some plants from Holland, but unfortunately the laws won't let me bring back plants from Holland.
No.
This is so good. Thank you so much to everybody that sent things in.
So lovely to hear people's voices, wasn't it?
Oh, very, very joyful. Well, I'm going to go do lots of research about loose parts trees, and unfortunately your job is to go and do experiences of loose parts plays with all these different things.
Okay.
I will see you next time, mate. Bye.
Hey, I'm Nick. What trees do I like climbing in? When I was a kid, I grew up in a place that had cedars of Lebanon and a vast collection of yew trees, which had the most amazing limbs for climbing on. The mixture of the two things just meant that I could spend ages off the ground, like the fire is lava, and that catalysed me becoming a forest school leader, I think. So cedars of Lebanon and yew trees